Welcome back to another episode of Baker Dave Presents. Once again, we're here in the Morgan Hall Kitchens at Temple University. It's a residence hall, and it's a working kitchen. But today, we're closed. There's no students here. We're on break. I decided to take this opportunity to do a solo episode and talk about my love for baking and the stories that I have, and we're going to make some creme brulee coming right up. Welcome. So today, this episode is all about me. This is about my relationship with baking, why I think baking is important, and why I got into this whole baking thing, right? I feel like baking is something you don't have to do. I feel like cooking is something you have to do. You always have to cook because you need food to stay alive, right? And there's definitely times in your life where you do not feel like cooking. There's times where you've been working all day, you've been out in the yard, whatever, and you're like, let's just order a pizza, right? That never happens with baking. If you're baking, it's because you wanted to bake. No one just decides, I have to bake tonight and I don't feel like it. I have to make cupcakes. Like, it doesn't happen. Baking is something you do with your children. Baking is something that you learn when you are an infant with your grandmother, when you're over her shoulder tasting the paddles and the spoons as she's mixing stuff up. Like, that's what baking is. Baking is about family. You make it with your spouse, your significant other, your children. You're having a good time. It's gifts. Countless times I've given wedding cakes as a gift. You don't get the other gift, you get a wedding cake, and it means so much more because I didn't have to do it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like regular food, like you can't just decide if you were the guy that was making the steaks for the wedding or whatever. You couldn't just decide, I don't feel like making the steaks today. And then they have no food, right? Then what do? But you don't have to make a cake. You could go to a wedding without a cake. You don't have to have a cake. But I made a cake, and since I didn't have to do it, it comes from the heart. It's more love. It's what I am, right? It's partly why I got into baking. I mean, when I first went to the culinary school and I saw people cutting up meat and all this, it didn't appeal to me, the culinary side of it. But the pastry side did. When I saw them, it was very artistic. It was very personal. It was, bakeries are always, the pastry shop is the other side of the kitchen. Like, nobody pays attention. They're the people behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. That's the pastry department. That's how we've always run. And that's important to me. One of the things that I've noticed trends in the world is cooks or chefs love to make it seem like their job is totally impossible and you can't do it, right? But you're at home cooking every day, so obviously you can do it. And maybe that's part of the reason why they have to go out of their way to make sure it's impossible. A lot of people consequently feel like baking is the hardest thing in the world to do. A lot of chefs will not bake. You bring a bakery thing into to a chef and they panic. They freak, oh no, I can't do that. I can't measure things. That's a science. They're totally against it. And that's why a lot of times you'll go to a fancy restaurant, you go to these 4 or 5 star restaurants, and you can tell if they have a pastry chef almost. Because if you go to that restaurant and their main dessert they're giving you is creme brulee, they probably don't have a pastry chef. No offense to creme brulee. Creme brulee is delicious, but it's got to be one of the easiest desserts to make. And I hate that everybody thinks it's so difficult and this super high-end dessert. So today, I'm going to show you how easy creme brulee is. I mean, it literally, if you look down here, you've got 4 ingredients. It is not a difficult dish, okay? And I'm going to show you how easy it is, and you're going to love it. First of all, when you do creme brulee, it's a custard, okay? So it's literally heavy cream, eggs, sugar, and some vanilla. That's it, okay? It comes out like a baked pudding, if you will. What you need to understand is that creme brulee as a custard falls into the custard category, okay? In baking, there's really only like 4 or 5 things that we make, and we just simply change everything around and make you think we're making other things, right? So once you make this mix-up, if you throw some bread in there and put it in the same pan in the water bath in the oven, you've got bread pudding. You take a mix similar to this and you throw some pumpkin in it and you've got pumpkin pie that you don't have to bake in a shell. You could bake that the same way we're baking this and eat just the filling if you don't really like pie crust. Not a huge fan of pie crust, I eat it, but I like the filling better. Cheesecake. Cheesecake is basically a custard. It's baked the same way. So all these things that you might think are super difficult, you're going to find out today are not that difficult. What you're going to do is we're going to start with the eggs. We've got 3 whole eggs and we've got 6 egg yolks. And The way I have this recipe set up, it's very fatty. And there's a reason for that, because baking is a science. The more fat you have in this recipe, the harder it is for you to get scrambled eggs out of this at the end. So when you make custards that have less fat in them, you need to be more careful about making sure you take them out on time. This, if it sits in the oven slightly longer than it needs to, you're still not going to have a sweetened scrambled egg. You're still going to have a beautiful custard, which is why I love this recipe so much. So we've got our eggs. And then the first thing you add to the eggs is sugar. The sugar is going to help break it down a little bit. It's actually going to cook the eggs slightly, and it's going to bring it all together. Okay? There's not a lot of sugar in here. We're talking like a half a cup. And we're whipping that up and getting the yolks and stuff mixed in. We're going to add our vanilla. This is just a regular vanilla. If you want, you can actually steep the vanilla overnight in your heavy cream, like vanilla beans, and that way you get the actual beans and the whole cream tastes like vanilla. It's a delicious thing to do. And we're going to add our heavy cream. That's it. So at this point, we have a beautiful custard that is creme brulee. We simply need to bake it, right? Oh, by the way, creme brulee loosely translates to burnt cream. So the difference between a creme brulee and some other custard, like a creme caramel or something of that sort, is the fact that you burn the sugar off at the end. So it's the caramelized sugar that you get that makes it creme brulee. So we have these beautiful dishes. I want you to know you can use any dish. I've used coffee mugs for my house if you want. Anything that you can bake, any kind of stoneware that you can put in the oven, that's what you want to use. I wouldn't put it in plastic. That might be a mistake. And we're just going to fill these up. And there's no leavening agent in here, so it's not going to rise. It's literally going to be wherever you fill it up to. The other thing that this basically is, if you put this over a double boiler and kind of warm it up enough so that you can, or if you use pasteurized eggs, that's another option, you can take the same mixture and run it through an ice cream machine, and it makes the most delicious ice cream. So there's a million uses for this, and this is as simple as it gets. Totally just made a mess. It's because I was not paying attention. Got to pay attention in the kitchen. The key to this, right, is the water bath. So what we're doing is we're adding water to the pan, okay? Not to the dish itself, but into the pan. And the reason you do that is it causes an indirect heat. Not that unlike maybe ribs on a grill. You would not put them directly on the heat. You'd set them to the side so they cook a little slower. By putting this in a water bath, we can put this in an oven, in a 350-degree oven, and it's not actually going to cook it at 350 degrees because it's going to heat the water up, and water only heats up to 212 degrees when it's boiling. So it's not going to really cook much over that at that point. So that's why you use a water bath, and you can use that with any kind of custard, and it helps you have a beautiful, smooth, creamy custard instead of a souffle. Like a souffle is basically a custard that you don't use a water bath for necessarily, that it's going to pop up and souffle from the eggs coagulating. That's a whole nother Bill Nye the Science Guy class. So we're going to add the water to this, and it's not a lot. It's like 2 cups maybe for this particular one because of my container. Simple sheet pan, and we're going to go ahead and stick that in the oven. And that's going to bake maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. You're going to know it's done because it's set. It's going to feel kind of like Jell-O. So when you pull out of the oven and you tap it, it's kind of wiggly, and it's set though. It's not sticking to your fingers. That's how you know it's done. If you pull it out slightly too early, don't panic. It just means it'll be a little bit, it's like a soft-boiled egg at that point, right? So it's not quite as hard as the other thing, but it's still just as delicious, and all the bacteria is dead because it's been there for an hour at 350 degrees. So you don't have to worry about getting sick, and it's just a little softer. So it's still a beautiful, delicious meal. So creme brulee, as it's known today, actually started in France. It sounds very French, right? Creme brulee. Probably in the late 1600s. That's when we would have seen it in the cookbook when it actually came out, and they started the idea of burning the sugar on top. It's interesting, but later on in England, they picked it up. They picked up in Spain, they picked up in England, they changed the name. Some people called it creme anglaise, which is a totally different thing now. Trinity cream, they renamed it whatever to try to make it their thing in their area, right? And one of the things that they had done is in England, they actually used a branding iron to try to get the marks on top of the creme brulee. I guess that's their way of making it their own, right? I mean, we all do that. Even today, we make it our own. As you can see, it's not a difficult dish. I'm going to go ahead. I think that ours is about ready. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out of the oven now so you can see what it looks like in its setup state. You want to make sure you don't get water into it because that affects, if it's too loose with the water, then it's not going to set up properly, right? You're going to see there's a little bit of color around the outside edge. That's a good thing. As you can see, a couple of these didn't set as well as the other ones. They sunk in slightly. That's okay. That's what I said. It might be a little bit looser there, but it's totally set, and that's fine. Okay. What makes this creme brulee, as opposed to some other type of custard, is the burnt cream. Now today I did not bring a branding iron. I'm not going to lie. I have no branding iron sitting around, but I did bring a torch because we're in America, and we like manly torches. Arr! You know, so that's what I'm going to use. And you just take simple sugar, granulated sugar, and what you're going to do is you're going to cover the entire surface of it with the sugar. And basically we're going to caramelize the sugar. It's not unlike caramels that you eat in the store, only we're taking it past that. We're taking it to a hard stage, more like a lollipop, right? But the flavor of the burnt sugar instead of just simply the flavor of sugar or raspberry or whatever flavor they put in lollipops, right? So we're going to light this up, and you're going to see this is the most fun. And you're going to watch the sugar will actually almost instantly start turning. A lot of restaurants will actually take this and they'll put it under a salamander instead of using a torch. It's not as much fun, but it does the same job. And you're seeing that beautiful caramel color coming through. Once that sets, it's going to be a nice crust. And maybe that's the fun part of the creme brulee when it comes to fancy restaurants, is you're going to take a spoon and you're going to break right through that crust before you get to the beautiful custardy inside.
What is a salamander?
So a salamander, another way of doing this, is I'm trying to think what the most normal thing is for people outside of the kitchen, where it's just top heat. I'm trying to think what that's called. Broiler, that's what it is. Holy cow, I had a little bit of a brain situation there. So it's like a broiler in your own oven. It's extreme heat just on the top. So you could broil this and actually get the same effect if you do not have a torch readily available, which is a shame because everyone should have torches readily available. Again, I think this is a beautiful dessert. I'm not going to bother doing all these. And I'm going to say that as I taste it, it's delicious, but I don't want you to take my word for it, okay? I'm going to bring in one of the crew. We have Stefan here who's volunteered to help us out with this. Have you ever had creme brulee? Make sure it's nice. Oh yeah, it's good. I don't know if you can get the microphone in on this, but go ahead and crack through that.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that nice? That's what you want. You want the cracked part though. You got to get the crackiness in there. All right, cheers.
Wow, really good.
Fancy, right? Mm-hmm. Super simple. I'm not going to eat that one now. You can have it all. You can have all of it if you like. Like it's special when you get to the bottom and it's colder, so you get the heat and the cold.
I see it.
Kind of like the ice cream with hot apple pie, right? Thank you for joining us here on Baker Dave Presents. I hope you've enjoyed my special solo episode and the little history lesson I've given you on creme brulee. I'd like to put a special thank you to our taste tester, Stefan, student athlete extraordinaire, football player here at Temple University. And join us again next time on Baker Dave Presents. And remember, every recipe has a story.